Mr. Vivek Chawla. He is the CEO of, I would say he is the young CEO of a young cement company. But don't get fooled by his youth or youthful looks. He's actually a veteran of many battles, and he has seen many ups and downs of cement as well as aluminium sectors. And today he is smack in the middle of the Eastern market, which has always been a very interesting cement market in India. So today we have the privilege of getting to know from him a little bit of what is happening in the Eastern market in this special situation we are in. Thank you, Vivek, for joining us today and agreeing to answer our questions.
No, it's a pleasure, sir. It's an honor to be answering your questions, and I'll do my best to do whatever is possible, sir.
Sure, you will do very well. So the first question, it's something that is asked by everyone, and I'm no exception. The first question is, in this situation of lockdown, in this situation of, if I may say, pandemic and very unusual, very unprecedented, obviously you had disruptions in manufacturing operations, supply chain, etc. From 20th April, some relaxations were given and some plants were allowed to start. And I understand that some cement started moving. So give us a sense of two things. One, how did you start your operations, and how do you feel this demand coming across from the market? Number one. Number two, what challenges did you foresee in starting your operations, either from workman point of view, safety and hygiene point of view, or even from the point of view of trucks, etc., supply chain?
Yeah, actually, sir, I'll come to this from the beginning, because when the lockdown happened, we had nothing else to. We went ahead and stopped all the plants when the lockdown was announced on 24th of March, and that is when we stopped all the plants that were operating. But during this time, we actually maintained our meeting rhythm. The meeting rhythm we maintained through, like, there is a daily meeting, there is a weekly meeting, there is something which goes on with the plants, there is something which goes on with the. But then we started doing it virtually. We had Zoom calls, we had telephonic calls, and we were actually talking to each other, and we were maintaining that contact with the team when we were in the middle of the lockdown. And what we did was to bring down our receivables or outstanding, or the way we call it, from say 22 days to when we started the operation to around 12-13 days. Each and every person in the company was trying to get the receivables, get the money which was there stuck up in the market, because already there were certain things. So we were all together, we were in touch with each other. And as it happened after 23rd of or around say 20th of April, when things started loosening up a bit, and in the rural part of India, we were told to start the operations. So the first step that we did was to get the approval of the relevant district administration and the state administration to start the plant. Because they gave specific permissions to start the plant with a specific number of people which could be deployed in the factory. So we got permission for each of our locations, and during this particular point in time, we started our operations taking into consideration the Ministry of Home Affairs circular, which very clearly actually specifies and lists down the various things that each plant has to do when they are allowing the whole entry of people inside, which was mainly to do with the way we check the people who come inside the plant. Then how do we look after them when they are working in the plant with regard to social distancing, with regard to hygiene, with regard to certain places where continuous cleaning has to be done, like in the places where workmen are working or where toilets are there. All these things were taken into consideration. We made those SOPs in place, and after those SOPs were properly scrutinized and done, that is when we started. After, I think it took us around 36 hours to 48 hours to get the permissions, keep the whole thing ready with regard to the circular of the MHA and all that kind of thing. That is when we started operating the plant. Now, because we were constantly in touch with the channel, we were constantly in touch with the institutional buyers during the time of the lockdown. What we saw is in the 10-day period, we were able to do actually our around 1/3 of our production, which we would have done in the full month. Like in the 10-day period, we were able to do around, say, around more than 160,000 tons. So that is where we saw that there was a pent-up demand which was there at the counters, where what we saw was at the counter, because there was no cement available, people were rushing to fill up the counters. There were certain projects, sir, which were midway, which actually immediately started the movement. And the government was also eager to start certain projects in the National Highway Authority and other places, so as to immediately start the demand of cement. But how will this shape up in the coming days is a big question mark, because basically this was something which was not actual demand, which was something which is, say, at the counter, say there are certain projects which are started. But now it will depend on two main important things. One thing would be the availability of labor. Now, even the labor availability for the cement plant in places which are labor intensive, like packing house, has started becoming a challenge. Because that is where there are migrant laborers which were there. And that is where the challenges will now come. The second challenge, of course, which remains to be addressed is the truckers. You see, most of the trucks are there which were flying with the company, but the drivers are not there. You see, the trucks are very much there with the people, but the drivers are not there. So in order to get the drivers, in order to actually give them that kind of confidence, because today, any truck which is entering the plant is sanitized. We have a spray system where we sanitize the truck, we look after the driver, we do everything possible. But the fear which is there in terms of people who are working in packing house and who are actually going to the packing house to load the trucks is something which will take its own time to come over, because that is where we will have to be very, very careful with regard to all the checking that we do, with regard to all the precautions that we take. So, sir, basically, this demand which has come in the beginning of 10-15 days of operation is not something which would be sustainable in the long term, because the government spending with the kind of input the government will have in terms of the taxes, etc., is going to be cut down drastically. And of course, the IHB segment is fine in the rural part, but the real estate is going to take a major backseat. So I see, at least in the current year, you see, today, if you see, in the month of March, there was a reduction in demand by 30% in East. In April, the demand reduced by more than 70-80%. Hardly 20% of the whole thing was there, because in April, we operated for 10 days. Similarly, what I see in the month of June, July, and July, August, September, in any case, are months when we have very low demand due to the monsoon period and all that. Then comes the season for the festivals. So I personally believe 10 to 30% reduction in demand in the coming days for cement is a very, very fair estimate, which is most optimistic, because it can further go down. It cannot, I don't see any improvement. And it is only after December 2020. And hopefully by that time, we will have a vaccine or something which is a definite protocol for the management of COVID. That is when I see a good pickup in demand in January 2021.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting, and some of it, I'm sure, is not known to the routine observer. Some of the intricate details that you have shared just now. So, to sum it up, can I say that your view of the coming financial year, that cement consumption demand growth in that year, is that there will be a decline of 10 to 30% in the full year?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that sort of...
Because in any case, sir,
yeah.
In any case, sir, our GDP estimates have been brought down to hardly 1% now for the current year. Now, if that is the way we look at it, then if you see the corresponding period, similar period last year, there has to be a reduction in the demand of cement.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm not the interviewee here, but I would like to add my two pennies worth here to say that judging by the past trend of predictions and forecasts on GDP, etc., and the way the GDP forecast for FY21 is being downgraded every day by different bodies sequentially one after another, I expect that the year FY21 there will be a contraction. There will not be any positive growth for the GDP.
Yeah, that is what.
As of now, as things stand today, with a lockdown of 3rd May, with a lockdown, you see, it has a direct bearing on the lockdown. So lockdown up to 3rd May, there was already a prediction of 0 to 1%. Now that lockdown has been extended, and I don't know, Telangana has already announced 29th May.
29th, yeah.
So it is only going to go down from there. So it is anybody's guess.
Yeah.
So thank you for your inputs on that point. And I think you have also covered the prognosis of cement demand for the full year, more or less. Coming back, taking a step back from this COVID scenario, etc., and talking something a little bit different. I want to talk about your brand, and I want to ask you. There has been this interesting brand that you guys have developed in Emami Cement called Double Bull. And let me say that when it was originally launched and all that, I myself personally as an observer was a little bit skeptical about the basic building blocks of that brand. But today I must accept and admit that the brand has made a good name in the Eastern India, wherever you are present, whichever markets you are present. And you should be proud of it justifiably. So if you, to the extent you can share, if you can tell us in short about what are the, basic actions that you took on this, on developing this brand, and also, what is the brand promise that you make through this brand to the consumer?
Yeah, you see, sir, we come from, actually, when I took over when I joined this company in August 2016, we had just started production in our Vista plant. And we actually belong to a company or a group which has a legacy of building brands. Like they have built brands like Boroplus, Navratan, all these kind of brands have been made by Emami Group. Now, this particular brand of cement which was there, at that point of time, in the beginning itself, this brand was made a mnemonic. You see, in the mnemonic, we have two bulls which actually show. Because even if somebody doesn't know the meaning of double bull, when he will see those two bulls in the whole, and which are there in everywhere, he will understand that this is something to do with bull. And bull actually has a connotation with the strength. So that's what. And our promise was more than ummid se jada. Matlab, you see, majbuti ummid se jada was our promise to the person who was buying this. And right from the day one, what we did was our internal ROMs that we set up for our strength of cement. When we collected the samples for overall cluster and where we were operating and that kind of thing, so we wanted to keep a better kind of thing. And that we very, very religiously adhered to, okay, we will have this kind of internal strength that we will maintain from the plant. And of course, in the process, we also looked at our channel, our business partners, how do we do that? And then we had a proper kind of this thing for the overall, the way we would like to do it at the dealer shop, at the retailer shop, what we would like to do. And then being a very, very young company, sir, what we did was, we had a strong team of 200 people, which in good old days we used to call customer support. Here we call them business development people. And these were the people who were working round the clock, a 200 strong team other than sales team. And this team was only used to develop the brand, develop the product, do conversion from one cement to another at the site. And this is where we actually had a winning proposition as far as the market penetration was concerned. And of course, we did a lot of work in terms of dealer appointment, in terms of giving a better, because why anybody will sell Emami double bull if he doesn't get 2 paisa, 3 paisa more than, or a percentage more than what he will get from the other brand. So these were a host of activities that we did. But in the process, there were 2 or 3 non-negotiable things that as per our corporate logo and everything that we decided in terms of the rolling out of ads, the rolling out of TV season, whatever we did commercials, it had to be done in a proper manner, in a way that we had defined it. And the second point was quality, and the quality of packaging, quality of cement and quality of packaging was non-negotiable. This is something we till date also we maintain. This is how we were able to. And then, like in today Chhattisgarh, somebody calls it Bela Jodi, somebody may call it something. But still, I am very happy to say that in the markets where we operate, people know at least our brand. I don't say we have a brand which is a brand pull and people are asking for that, isn't it? But then when 4 types of cements are discussed in our area, our brand is known.
Yeah, I agree with that statement, and maybe you are being a little humble, and I agree that the brand has made its own presence felt, and that's why I wanted to ask that question of you. Moving over now to the issue of cash flow. Today, in this COVID-19 situation where banks are being asked to give moratorium and some tenants are not paying rent, and there is force majeure all around in being invoked in contracts, and it's a very special situation. And people have already, I get to see the trend that people have started conserving cash. And I don't know for what, but people are trying to conserve cash, not knowing about what is in store in the coming months. So this conservation of cash has some meaning for your downstream. That means your service providers, suppliers, etc., etc. Also has some meaning to your distributors and your dealers, etc., etc. So your supply chain on both sides, the cash strategy straddles that. So what's your take on cash management today, and are you doing anything special today for both the downstream and upstream, your suppliers as well as your distributors?
No, sir, as far as the cash management goes, cash has always been the king. We always say cash is king. But here, the cash is something which has become something which is much more important than a king or somebody. Because today, for a company like us who have a debt on its books, management of cash is of prime most importance, which is actually, if you see the senior management team, including me, is actually devoting most of our time in management of cash. What we have done is, there was a moratorium on the interest, which is a moratorium of interest, and 3 months they have extended the overall duration of the loan. Now, if the loan was there for 10 years, it becomes for 10 years. And if it was, say, going to end on, say, December 2030, then it will end in April 2030. 3 months ka extension they have given, which we have taken. And we have also taken the moratorium on the interest part. Because that interest 3-month moratorium is given, which is at a cost. Because actually the banks have been not giving it, which is at a cost of 9% of interest, which we will have to pay on the interest that we do not pay today.
Right.
But still, we have taken a call that we will pay that interest in the 3 months period of time, because we wanted to conserve that money again for our supply chain and for our value chain, which is our business partners. Because ultimately, unless until we start rotating money, because the first thing would be to send cement in the market. Because as you send cement in the market, it generates further money. Because suppose today I have to pay, or I have to pay to the company 2 lakh rupees. But I will not pay that 2 lakh rupees till I get my next consignment of cement, and then I start rolling the money back to the company. So it's very important that you start giving cement And in the process, you give cement to people only to those partners who are able to plow back the money which you have given back. So this is how we have started the rolling, because this is how we have started the flywheel moving, because that is where we will start doing it. The second point is, sir, what we did was most of the major contracts of, like, say, fuel supply agreement for coal. So we surrendered that. We didn't, so for a 3-month period, we surrendered our this thing. We will not require that coal because it is something, because internationally, if you see, even nationally, the pet coke prices have come down drastically. And there is a provision that we can forego 3 months of our supply without any additional charges. So we have looked at certain contracts. We have looked at and these are true for fly ash, these are true for slag, because these are major things which actually consume a lot of money. Because coal, fly ash, and slag are the major things which we have a lot of cash flow which goes out of the company. So that is where we were able to conserve. And the conservation of cash is basically not, it is for giving to the bag supplier, it is for giving to the channel, it is for giving to the transporters, which is very important. So we have actually segregated where it is not required. We have tried to conserve, and we have made a deliberate call to give it to people where it is required to move the flywheel of our business. So that is how we have managed.
Yeah, nicely explained. Thanks. I think that sort of answers that question quite adequately. But a small corollary of that question, if I may, is about capital expenditure. So a part of our cash also goes into capital expenditure. We have covered revenue and OPEX, etc. But a cement plant, as we know, at any point of time, even if there is no major capital expansion, capacity creation, there are balancing investments, augmentation or debottlenecking or energy efficiency projects, all those kind of capexes do go on. And I'm sure Emami also will be no exception. There will be certain capex plans pre-COVID. And I would like to know from you, if you allow us, what is your strategy about capital expenditure management, or change in strategy or anything, or capping capital expenditure, if any?
Yeah, before I come there, sir, uh, on the capex, I would also like to in a small way, touch the fixed cost expenditure. We did a lot of work in the fixed cost, because basically fixed cost in terms of the people the human resource is something which is a very debatable point today. And we took a call that the workmen category who is there, we would like to compensate them for whatever has been done. But there are certain other things in terms of fixed cost with regard to taking warehouses, with regard to office spaces, with regard to certain calls with vehicle movements inside the plant and the bigger things which were there. There we have taken a lot of tough calls in terms of reducing the fixed expenses, which would not only sustain the COVID, but even after COVID, it would be there for us. So these are certain things which we did for the fixed cost. Now, when we come to any capex that is there for continuous improvement work that we do in the plants, so basically, fortunately, most of the projects which were there in Emami with regard to the enhancement of capacity to a level of 8.5 million tons of grinding and around 3.2 million tons of clinker are completed. There were certain projects which were for alternative fuel, and there were other projects with regard to feeding of certain material, with regard to some elevator being put somewhere. So there, you see, most of the things were ordered and we were in the process of receiving them. So we are actually caught on a foot where we don't have any major commitment coming in the next 6 months. And the only thing is, if the demand does not pick up, and if we are able to operate at 60-70% of our capacity, so then there is no point in actually getting into any kind of investment unless until it makes you more energy efficient, or in any other way it makes you efficient, because volume based kind of things would definitely take a backseat as far as the overall thing is concerned, because the overall demand per se will come down, sir. So for the efficiency part, we will not be, and there are very few projects, let me tell you, as far as efficiencies are concerned, in terms of AFR in terms of kilocals per kg of clinker, some units. So those things we would not like to stop, which are not a major kind of capex. But other things will take definitely a backseat till December, and then we would be able to take a call on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. There is, we are almost near the end of our discussion. There is always this interesting question, which is very complicated to ask and to answer, and that is about prices. And but no discussion about cement is also complete without a sense of what's happening to prices. We see that there are some very strange messages coming through from, say, something like Tamil Nadu market, 100 rupees increase in cement prices. In also some other states in South India, I think there are jerky and high increase of cement prices reported. I get some rumors that from all markets, including Eastern India, some price increases have happened. Now, to the extent you can share with us, I mean, my question is that are these price increases driven by the urge to recover increased costs, or are these price increases driven by a real shortage in the market, or maybe a transient shortage in the market, or what is the driving force for these price increases?
So I would again look at it from a different point of view, sir, because when the cement was not available, and it is the first time in the history of cement industry, or for that matter any industry, you see auto, April, right from Mercedes till Maruti, nobody has sold even a single unit. So basically what happened was, in cement, there was a long period of 24, 26 days when there was no supply was. So and I must say that in the rural part of the country, cement was moving from the dealer to retailer to the consumer.
Okay.
There was some kind of activity which was going on. And in the process, basically, the whole counters had become empty, everything had gone. And at the retail itself, because cement was scarce, there was a lot of price increase at the retail counter.
Okay.
Right. And that price increase actually got down to the other part of slowly. And how much sustenance it will be there for this price increase. But one thing which we cannot deny is the fact that if the whole industry operates as 50-60% of capacity utilization, and this being an industry which is highly intensive in terms of capex as well as intensive in terms of fixed costs. So basically the fixed cost increase, what we are looking at is at least 30 to 40%. And that 30 to 40% fixed cost increase, because the denominator will change like anything. And most of it, sir, if we spend as a company 20 crores per month cash on fixed cost, what best you can bring it down to 20%, 25%. Beyond that, it will be very difficult, because basically in a drastic way, reducing the workforce, reducing anything would not be possible at this point in time, and which is not right also. So therefore, I personally believe that one thing which will drive the prices would be the demand part, which presently it is because the shelves are empty, there was nothing there, the godowns are empty, therefore it is being driven by that. The second thing would be actually the high increase in terms of the cost of fixed cost in view of the lower utilization of the industry, which will also drive some of the cost. But at the end of the day, sir, it will become a demand supply game only, which has always been there. Whatever way we have told, because you have also answered these kind of questions, and it always boils down to demand and supply.
True, true. Only thing is, in between, in a dynamic situation, we see some imperfections. Ultimately, it does even out.
Yeah.
But we try to do a big deal out of these quarterly imperfections from time to time. But we have to accept that these situations today are so unusual and so non-repeating, and so much without precedent that becomes very difficult for anyone to figure out what's going to happen.
Correct.
So, Vivek, I mean, before we sign off, I would like to ask you, for our readers, would you like to give any message would you like to, have we missed something important, or any message from a CEO in an important cement company in the Eastern India to the readers of Indian Cement Review? Anything specific or anything global? Anything about the new way of doing business, or anything about
No, you see, sir, post-COVID, the way we are operating today, things are going to change whether we like it or not. The way we go to the plants, the way each plant head, each of his teams does the work there in the plant is going to go a sea change. And we will have to adopt to these kind of changes, because any small thing which happens in the plant, right? There was a mishap in one of our plants where a driver had a loose motion. And then it became in such a big manner that in minutes the whole factory was out. Something has happened and somebody has got sick, because sickness means a very, very different kind of connotation today. So we'll have to be not only careful, we'll have to more and more educate our people in terms of whatever is going to happen. The management team, the workmen, everybody will have to be given those kind of trainings, given those kind of inputs, that this would become a way of life. The way you talk to people, the way you distance yourself from people. So basically, the way we do our business is definitely going to change, sir. Like in packing house, where it is more labor intensive, you have to maintain those kind of distances. And what we have seen is that if we are able to properly, transparently communicate with our own people, it actually makes a huge difference in the motivation of the team. And nothing becomes something which you are not able to achieve if you put that into the right perspective. So what I would say is transparently communicate with the people and be a good motivation for the team, so that we are able to come out of these challenging times. We will come out. And that's my only this thing. And I would like to thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity of putting my thoughts across, because it's a privilege to be sitting in front of a person whom I used to always admire as my boss in ACC. And really, sir, thank you so much.
You are being over generous. On behalf of our readers, it is my privilege to thank you for giving your time, and you have been always supportive of Indian Cement Review and its readers, and you have never shied away from your responsibility to communicate to the stakeholders in the cement industry, and we are one such forum. So thank you very much, and we look forward to be in touch with you, and wish you all the best to you and your team.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.